Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our webinar, A More Perfect Power, where we'll talk about community organizing as an avenue for change work. My name is Dominique, and my colleague here, Seth Beatty. We're with Spire and Base. We're both co-directors of this company, where we support learning, research, and strategy work that advances equitable practices in community development, arts and culture, and creative placemaking. And just want to thank you all again for making time to join us today. This is the third of four webinars that we've been doing with our partners at ThirdSpace Action Lab. And so far, they've all had to do with community change work in some degree. Our first webinar was sharing some preliminary findings from a research project looking at the state of housing justice partnerships today and to what degree housing workers and movement workers collaborate. Our second webinar was around accountability infrastructure within community change work. And today we'll discuss community organizing as a form of community change work. The need for community change work is ongoing, though it can be felt very acutely in times of crisis and instability. And it's both about advocating for change that sustains and pours into our communities and also opposing change that's extractive and does not support our communities. So considering that, it makes sense that community development itself was born from community change work, specifically the civil rights and Black power movements that were comprised of a constellation of local organizing and movement work. And there are community development organizations today that were born from that community change work that was done decades ago. So we know this work hasn't stopped, but it certainly has changed. So we'll hear from two panelists about what this work looks like today and how community organizing relates to other avenues for community change, like direct services, local movement work, et cetera. So let's start to get to it. We'll do a few more introductions, talk about our partners at ThirdSpace Action Lab and the folks at the Alliance Twin Cities who informed this particular topic. We'll do a little bit more framing around the conversation today, then we'll dive in with our panelists and then move into a group discussion. So again, looking forward to the conversation today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Monica Copeland, our partners at ThirdSpace Action Lab, to share about their work.
Thanks, Dominique, and thank you to Spire and Base for hosting these, co-hosting these events with us. The topics have been really interesting, and our partners have been very engaged. So I really appreciate your hard work on these. Welcome everybody to the webinar. My name is Monica Copeland. I work at ThirdSpace Action Lab. ThirdSpace, for those who may not know, is a consulting firm, Black-owned, women-led, based in Cleveland, Ohio. And we've generally engaged in contracts that involve racial equity and community engagement and topics like that. One project that has come out of ThirdSpace has been the People's Practice, which is an initiative that I work on along with my colleague Curtis, who's on the call. With the People's Practice is a multi-strategy initiative, so it includes things like webinars and resources and tools and guides and the works for practitioners who want to advance anti-racist community development. And one piece of the project has been our work on the ground with communities in three particular regions. So we at the People's Practice have taken our work and the ideas and the framework and the research to communities such as Jackson, Mississippi, which is representative of the Deep South, and also Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Twin Cities. And so we have a representative share about that. And then we also are doing some work in Central Appalachia. So thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to telling you more about our work.
Thanks so much, Monica. Love to invite you, Juan Luis, to share about the Alliance with our folks today.
Yeah, good to see folks. Thanks for the invitation. Super excited to be here. And yeah, shout out to Spire and Base for getting us all together here. Yeah, good to see our T-cell friends. My name is Juan Luis, him pronouns. I'm one of the coalition organizers at the Alliance. The Alliance for Metropolitan Stability itself is a membership-based organization here rooted in the Twin Cities. Our mission is to build power across the intersections of geography, race, culture, and issues in the Twin Cities region to eliminate systems of oppression and advancing our collective liberation. We root ourselves in 7 values of racial justice, community expertise, intentionality, abundance, collective power, intersectionality, and shared leadership in the work that we do. And we're really excited to be chosen as one of the practitioners for T-Cell's Regional Action Plan work. Yeah, we work at the intersections of four core areas. So we do housing justice work, we do climate justice work, we do anti-displacement work as it relates to a variety of efforts, but mainly have been focused as anti-displacement as it relates to transportation infrastructure being built in our region, and then also do some small business resourcing. So those are our four core critical areas, in addition to some other stuff that we dabble in the Twin Cities region. Good to see you folks.
Thanks so much, Mona Lisa. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Seth Beatty, to give us a little bit of framing and a little bit more introduction for today's topic.
Hello, everyone. We are not going to spend a ton of time in the deck, but we did just want to provide a little bit of framing heading into what we know is going to be a great conversation, largely because organizing in social change work gets thrown around a lot, but we don't always slow down to talk about what we actually mean. So in the broadest sense, organizing really is about taking stuff that is disconnected and trying to make it into a cohesive whole. So it's really emphasizing bringing people together to make change, often through very decentralized leadership models. We should note that it's not the sole way to be driving change, either at a local or national level. And we wanted to draw out just a couple of distinctions that we're pointing out between direct service, activism, and organizing. Not that we think any one of these is preferable, but that you might use them in different ways in different circumstances. And in particular, we wanted to emphasize that when we're talking about organizing as compared to both direct service and activism, it tends to have a very long timeline because it's about building relationships, building connections, and ultimately building decentralized leadership. And so that is incredibly important to call out, that when we talk to people about does organizing work, often in funding spaces, for instance, these things don't always align with a 3-month, 12-month, 3-year timeline. It's really long-term patient work. The other thing that we wanted to call out is that there are different organizing traditions. The lines are blurry between these, but there are different ways of, like, when we're saying that we're trying to organize something that's disconnected, are we organizing in a particular geography or across geographies or around where people work rather than where they live? Today, we're going to really be emphasizing community organizing. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be keeping in mind tactics that might be coming out of these other schools that could be really informative for our own work. So the use of membership-based structures, for instance, where people have direct skin in the game and the membership is driving the agenda, or in political organizing, looking at the role of communication strategy and how we might be able to adopt some of those strategies in community organizing. We recognize that community organizing can sometimes be a confusing lens through which to think about local movement work for a couple of different reasons. In today's modern community development sector, the reality is that if your title is community organizer, you're probably called upon to do a lot of direct service work as part of your job. So you may be doing power building, but you're also trying to raise the visibility of programs, helping people walk through different resources, getting them what they need to get. We also have a lot of folks that are probably doing more activism of trying to do short-term actions to raise visibility around issues, but then labeling it organizing. So we're really concentrating on, are you bringing folks together in a shared geography? Are you focusing on building up decentralized leadership and decision-making? And are you driving to make structural change? That's really the lens through which we're looking at community organizing today. We will not be going through each of these different rules of fundamentals of organizing, but just did want to pull some out that kind of reiterate this idea of the long-term development of resident leadership. Um, if you're interested, we are big fans of George Gale's Fundamentals of Organizing initiative, including a book that he released, really easy to read and really connects you to the day-to-day of doing this community organizing work. And that is the extent of our framing. I'm going to turn it back over to Dominique to get us started in the actual conversation.
Thank you so much, Seth. I think that's super helpful as we head into our conversation with our panelists. And thank you again, George and Daniel, for joining us today. Very much looking forward to the conversation. And would really just love to jump in just with just the basics of introducing yourselves. We often talk about this work is usually very personal for us. It's our job, but a lot of times we get to where we get because of just our own experiences and values and whatnot. So I'd love to hear just from each of you to share a little bit about yourselves, a little bit about the communities that you work with, and your own relationship to community organizing. Let's start with George, if you don't mind.
Sure. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everybody. And thank you for Third Space for inviting me to be here with y'all and to share more about what's happening in North Carolina and be in this great conversation. My name is George Barrett, and I'm the executive director of the Marion Cheek Jackson Center for City Making History. That's full name, but we usually just by the Jackson Center. And I grew up in, a little about me, grew up in mostly Charlotte, North Carolina, and then came up to Chapel Hill to go to school at UNC. And in my time at the university, one of the things that in my last semester of school, realized was that I had been very much in like the university bubble and didn't know, and the university doesn't do a good job of really showing that there is like a thriving, historic, incredibly powerful Black community outside the campus walls of UNC. And so it was through a class that I actually started volunteering in the North Side neighborhood, and I didn't know anything about the neighborhood existed. And when I came here and started volunteering here, it was a very eye-opening experience for me of one, knowing that there was a large Black community within Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill, North Carolina is very much known. It has a liberal, very like liberal ideal, but it's also very, very white, very, very fluent, very, very white. And a lot of people don't even know that there's a Black community within Chapel Hill. And so when I came here, I was just immersed myself in the work of listening to folks' histories, also realizing that like there's a whole community of uncles and aunties and grandmas and grandpas and folks and cousins who were here. Um, that were very much that could surround me and I was surrounded by in community. And then also realizing, learning the struggle of what was happening, not only historically in this neighborhood, but also that this neighborhood was now going through a period of pressure of displacement, mostly through investors who were taking advantage of the proximity of the universe of these houses, this university, buying properties usually under for real market rate was, and doing a lot of predatory investment, and then turning those properties and flipping those properties mostly into student rental development so they could rent to students by the bedroom, and thus creating this wave, especially in the early 2000s, where folks were now seeing the property tax rise, we're seeing people being displaced from their neighborhood, the history is being lost, and so the Jackson Center formed as a way to actually push back in 14 just to jump immediately into working directly in community and with community and figuring out how we push back and we preserve the history and the values and the people of this community that are very much responsible for why Chapel Hill is the way that it is, who have been the service workforce for Chapel Hill, who are folks who built the literal walls around the university and around the town, um, and just kind of jumped in head first, and now 12 years later have been here ever since, and continue to work directly with the neighbors to figure out and strategies. Oh no. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry. Is the internet better now? Is it good now? Okay. Sometimes in our office, the internet can go in and out. So if it keeps going that, please let me know and I might change rooms. Um, but yeah, just jumped into and continue to be good,
Yeah, we lost you again for a little
who
bit,
fought
George.
against urban renewal. Oh no. Okay. Maybe I need to transfer rooms.
Yeah, no worries. Definitely can
Okay.
do that at
Maybe
some
I don't
point.
know
We
if
can jump to
Daniel.
Daniel while you do that.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Sure, no
No
problem.
worries.
And thanks for sharing, George. Definitely cool to hear where you're coming from and how you got into this stuff. I was worried that it was my connection because we were supposed to get a storm here. I was like, oh, my worst nightmare. Um, but yeah, my name is Daniel Wiley. Thank you so much for Spire and Base and ThirdSpace for inviting me to participate in this conversation. Also, shout out to the Alliance, reading through some of your work. So glad to be able to connect with you all and hopefully be helpful to what you all are doing. Again, my name is Daniel Wiley, lifelong Newark, New Jersey resident. I started off as a community organizer a little bit over 10 years ago. Started my first community organizing experience outside of just the normal, just being a part of the community and interacting with folks and just trying to organize people to play sports and do recreation things as a kid. I moved into the more interesting part of organizing, which is for social justice. So my first organizing job was with or work was with Ironbound Community Corporation, which is a 50-year-old organization within the city of Newark. It's located in what we call the East Ward, the Ironbound section of the city. Most of their work is involved with environmental justice. But through environmental justice, we started seeing the overlap into some of the other things that were going on, not just in the one neighborhood, but throughout the city of Newark and also the region as well. Newark is one of those cities that we kind of catch the wave because of our proximity to New York City. We kind of catch the wave of what goes on there, whether it's 5, 10 to 20 years later, we catch that wave and it usually impacts us in a way that we're not necessarily ready for. So one of those waves that we caught was the housing wave. When Brooklyn, New York City, was going through its gentrification phase and the cost of living and that one particular borough started transferring over into some of our smaller cities in New Jersey, right across the river, which is Hoboken, which is like a 4 square mile city, one of the most expensive places to live in the country right now. And then our neighboring city, Jersey City, which again is very small in comparison to some of our other major cities, but becoming one of the most expensive places to live as well. In the city of Newark, we started realizing that we have to pay attention to housing. So I kind of got my foot into the ground as far as working on large scale campaigns and movement work in the housing capacity. But most of my background is actually in placekeeping and placemaking. But now I'll call placekeeping. Because I really like to put an emphasis on preservation of culture. And George mentioned this as well. Although Newark is predominantly Black and Brown community, the rapid scale of development at this point, we're starting to lose some of that culture that actually made our communities what they are. And I came up in graffiti culture. So one of the first things I dove into was graffiti, preservation of the graffiti culture, and we use that to create large scale murals throughout the city. Throughout that conversation, we started talking about how other cities are actually using art to create displacement because they're collaborating with developers, et cetera, et cetera. So that turned into another campaign too that kind of helped me better understand the overlap of development, housing that plays into the housing justice role, but also going into environmental justice as well. Being that a lot of our communities that have been facing environmental issues for so long really don't get to raise their voice for a lot of things until it's too late. And we're seeing rapid development actually creating an opportunity for us to voice those concerns. And we could dive into that later when we go through some of the questions. But um, moving forward, I've been different roles, managing director at small organizations. I realized I'm not a managing director, so I said, let me get out of this and do something else with my life. So now I work opposite of George. I actually work in the university setting. So I work at Seton Hall Law School, which is a law school in our downtown area of Newark. I work with the New Jersey Legal Design Lab. And what we do is we try to teach law student, third year law students how to become part of the movement via movement lawyering. And this is also an opportunity to showcase what community organizing is within the institution. So also been a really challenging but fun experience as well. But most of it revolves around what happens in community organizing, which is information design. So we focus on a lot of information design. One of the things we're working on right now is is our rent control policy. Rent control in Newark is one of the strongest policies in the country. So what we want to do is just create language within that policy so people on the ground can understand it better. And also just folks that are just looking to know what their rights are within the city of Newark can understand the language that goes into some of these policies so that they can protect themselves when the time comes. Um, I know we have a lot to talk about, so I'll just leave it there.
Appreciate it, Daniel. No, that's great. In Seth's framing, he mentioned kind of like these three different organizing tools: organizing, activism, direct services. And I feel like in both of your intros, you kind of touched on each of those. So we'd love to hear from both of you about how would you describe the relationship between organizing, activism, and direct services in local movement work? And in what circumstance would you focus on organizing rather than the other two?
Great. Okay. I'll jump in and hopefully test out that this internet situation is better. Is it? Okay. And if it keeps going, we'll keep it moving. Um, yeah, so to answer that question, I think one of the things that how I was thinking about this question, and I was honestly having a trouble thinking about the difference between organizing and activism in particular, because I think in Northside, like our organizing work and our is also activism, and activism shows up in our organizing work. So, for example, we do a lot of organizing against housing developments in the neighborhood, but also adjacent to the neighborhood that are going to affect affordability. And so that looks like, very like base level, like organizing of like getting folks to town council to speak out against a development in certain levels of the plan of when it's happening. That looks like holding events within the neighborhood that are advocating for actually affordable housing opportunities to be developed, especially if it's for some reason being held up by politics or by money or by any type of way, and actually bringing community together to make sure that something that's going to serve them actually moves through the process. And then also in how that works too, and when I see the activism showing up indirectly, is many times when we're like at these spaces, many times when we're at these spaces, neighbors are showing up and they're being the activists that they've been for generations. People are singing, people are bringing spoken word around like predatory development and investment. People are talking about and bringing even oral histories that are on our oral history website and playing those to speak to why it is important that this development doesn't happen so that we do not lose the history and the abundance of this community that's been here for so long. I remember at one point, one memory I have of one of the residents who was there took a big piece of trifold and held it up into the light, and it blocked the light from the council. And he said, do you see how this light is being blocked right now? This is what's going to happen with the sun being blocked in our neighborhood if you build this 10-story development adjacent to our community. And so when I was thinking about it, I just think about how those two active organizing and activism for us is so intertwined. is because we do the work and we work with community to direct the action in a specific way and to have very clear demands and have very clear ideas about and visions for like, here's what we want and here's what we don't want. And then get people to the spaces where they need to get to. But then a lot of times, people show up how they want to show up and are doing creative ways and actions that we're not even like, even might not even know is happening. Or we're like, you know what? Okay, that's what Andre's gonna do, and he's gonna do that, and it's great. And so I feel like I just see those two things happening at the same time. I also will say, like, I think in our organizing work, to and actually how it relates to direct service is, and the difference between those, and when I was thinking about that, is that we do at the Jackson Center do a lot of direct service, but it's direct service in as a tactic or as something that we're implementing that's from a larger neighborhood strategy. So for instance, like one of the strategies and one of the visions that neighbors put forth when this in development was happening and pushing people out was that, okay, we need to find out a way to make sure that we keep people in their homes. We keep our long-term residents, our elders, our families who have been here, who are fourth and fifth generation in this neighborhood. Number one priority, we got to keep them in their homes. How do we do that? We need to figure out a way to help people with their property taxes because that is continuing to increase and people are now they've paid off their whole home, but now some individuals are paying 30-40% of their annual income just to the property taxes. And these are folks who are usually on fixed income. And so we, pulled resources together, talked to funders, did fundraising to be able to implement, for now it's our seventh year, a property tax mitigation program where we have an application, we, distribute through grant funds, direct service to help folks pay for their property taxes. And that's a programmatic thing that's directly mitigating folks' immediate need. And at the same time, that's going towards the strategy of making sure that we retain our folks in the neighborhood, which allows us to accomplish our larger mission, as well as along those lines, still also doing larger organizing work to really also, for instance, push the county to redo how they evaluate properties in their valuations, because how they value Black land we're seeing is inequitable compared to how they're valuing more larger, more high wealth income white neighborhoods within Chapel Hill and within Orange County. And so at the same time as that we're directly helping people with their property taxes, we're also, sending letters to the county, showing up at the county in coalition with other Black neighborhoods to push back against how they do evaluations, proposing new ways and pointing out specifically how the county does valuations and how that shows up to be inequitable. Creating satirical videos that are calling that out and then are getting the larger community to write into the manager, write into the county to change that, which then allows us to we were able to in 2021 get the county to actually do a county-wide property tax mitigation program for the first time based off of that advocacy and organizing work, and also basing their program off of the program that we were doing in Northside. And so for us, all of those things are kind of like intertwined, and we're implementing them at the same time within community. But they're all still under, a larger strategic framework that we have of, for instance, in that specific case I talked about of retention. Number one thing, retain the people in their houses. And so I think that the multi-prongedness of it, is necessary, but it has a clear North Star that was a strategy that community members named from the beginning.
And thank you, George. And to follow up with that, I'll start with direct services. I've been fortunate or unfortunate to work for two organizations that saw direct services in different ways. I worked for a very large organization, which was Ironbound Community Corporation, that had a ton of direct services that they saw as a way to actually introduce the organization's mission to the community. And it was kind of like that the key phrase or the sexy phrase right now is honeypotting, right? So like it was like kind of like that honeypot to get people into the organization. I'm probably using that the wrong way, but either way, it was a way to get people to come into the organization. And the organizing wing of our work was actually a way to get people to stay involved with some of the things that we were doing within that organization. And then I worked for another organization where I was a managing director, where the board saw direct services as a negative. And in a way, they saw it as a way where it created more chaos, I guess, for lack of better phrasing, than anything. Meaning, like, it definitely it, it hindered folks' capacity on the ground. Meaning, like, if you're doing direct services and you have a very small staff, you're more susceptible to, like, answering phone calls at 8 o'clock at night when you're trying to relax yourself or trying to, wind down from what you're doing on a daily basis. So I'm in the middle with direct services. I see the pluses in it. I do really appreciate what the Ironbound Community Corporation did with their direct services, meaning using it as a tool to get people into the door to understand what the wider mission was. So that's definitely what I lean more towards. But as an organizer who has done direct services, like Seth said before, most of us that do organize on the ground, we find ourselves doing direct services whether we like it or not. Um, and I see that as, like, that's an easy way to just get burnt out, and just kind of just start seeing your job as more like, hey man, I'm just going through the motions. I'm not, I don't know what I signed up for anymore. And then going into organizing, and organizing activism, the way I see it, activism is a great way to showcase urgency. It's a great way to put things in the spotlight. So, like, George had a great illustration of, like, that person at the city council meeting illustrating how, like, a development was going to black out the sun in the community. And I think that's a great way um, to really get more people to pay attention to what you're doing, whether it's media or it's other community members that don't know what's going on in their community, or it's just either, like, people in the administration that really don't have their hands in what's going on in their jurisdictions. Activism is a great way to, like, what we call ruffle feathers, but at the same time, it's a great way for people to say, like, I need to pay more attention to this because more people are starting to show up for it. And when it comes to organizing, the way I see organizing, or the way I've experienced organizing, is a great way to just keep things rolling uh, for a very long time, like movements and, like, that base building that we put into organizing. And, like, whether it's like we have folks that are coming in and out of that circle, or if we have folks that are joining and they're learning from the experience, and they're becoming leaders in their community. I think that's where organizing really sticks. I'm one of those people that came into organizing. Again, my background in placemaking and placekeeping. And when I became a community organizer, I really thought that I was going to be doing more of that. But the first thing, 2 weeks into the job, was there was a public housing site in my community that was getting shut down. Like, a community member came up to me and was like, brought the flyer that the housing authority brought to them. And she was like, I don't know what this is for, but it doesn't look good. And from there, it was just like, all right, I guess this is what I do now. But yeah, I see organized, and these are folks. This is actually a great example. These are folks. This happened in 2013. These are folks that I still work with, on a yearly basis, to work with them on public housing policy or to help them advocate for themselves. I've seen, that the person that brought the flyer in, Ms. Brazil, rest of her soul, she passed away during the pandemic. But she was one of those people that became a leader through this process. And when, the folks within that, the public housing site and the tenant association actually were able, and it's called Terrell Homes, if anybody wants to look at it, look it up. It's in Newark. Um, the way they were able to advocate and actually preserve 275 and keep 275 affordable units in the community led to the daughter of Ms. Brazil actually becoming the tenant president of that tenant association right now, who I still work very closely with. So when I think of organizing, I think of those things, and I think of other organizations that we work, like Homes for All Newark, is, a subsidiary of the wider national Right to the City, Homes for All campaigns that go on. But these are things that started off as, like, it started off as activism to create visibility and turned into movements where, like, there's folks that have been involved with that for over 10 years right now. So, um, yeah, so direct services, definitely see it as a way to get people to understand the mission, activism, visibility, organizing, that just sustainable model to get folks, uh, you know, into positions of leadership within the community.
Thank you so much for that. And I real quick want to let folks know we'll be doing a Q&A after this, so please do jot down any questions that you might have for Daniel and George as we continue through the conversation. So you each, thank you so much for just talking about, again, the relationship between these three things. And I think as you were talking about that, discussing kind of like there's stuff that happens immediately that you kind of can get just pulled into direct services or whatnot while you're also trying to plan for longer term change. So I'd love to just talk about timelines in organizing work. What are some of the things to consider when trying to balance the urgency, the urgent issues that kind of come to your doorstep that you're working on in community emergencies, opposite this desire to have a longer term system change without getting burned out?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
oh, Dan, you can go.
Oh, sure. And I'm sorry, Dominique, can you repeat the question again? Because I missed the tail end of it. My fault.
Oh, just talking about managing timelines and organizing work. What are some things to consider when trying to balance urgent kind of community emergencies that you need to respond to, opposite of having this desire to focus on long-term systems change without triggering burnout? So that might be the last piece. Like, how do you kind of do that and not get burnt out?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And one thing that I've learned over the years is to make sure that you're open about the timeline for things in the very beginning. And there's two ways that I've experienced that. It's one where like the organization sees something in the community that might need a need. That goes more to like direct services. But there might be something in the neighborhood. Say, for instance, when we were working on our inclusionary zoning campaign in the city of Newark, that was something that was like initiated by the organization. But one of the things that we put in place is a lot of our organizers, including myself, were from the neighborhood. So it was kind of like we weren't coming into the neighborhood and saying like, hey, this is what you need. It's just more like, hey, I'm kind of going through this. I'm actually going through this too. And I'm in survival mode too. So we think this should happen. So, you know, that experience led us to understand that, like, when we come to folks with a timeline, it's more along the lines of saying, like, hey, what are you comfortable doing? What are you comfortable, you know, uh, I guess, connecting with us for lack of better phrasing? And like, again, like what I was saying before, some people come in and out of campaigns on a regular. Like, you might have people that are like set, they're riding with you the whole way, and you might have folks that just come in for like 2 weeks and they're just like, all right, I'm burnt out. I don't want to do this. Or you might have folks that come in and they have a different sense of urgency for something. So like inclusionary zoning might not be a good example of that, but I do say this when it comes to timelines. I think being very straightforward with the community about what the timeline might look for, and actually working with them or working within the community and say like, hey, this is a timeline that we'd like to meet, and it might go farther than that. Or hey, we might get this accomplished beforehand. It could be a good way to go about it. But as far as burnout goes, I think it goes back to like that organizing strategy. Whereas if you're building movements, one of the things that we should be putting into place when we're building movements is having something baked in for that leadership capacity to say like, hey, like if somebody does get burnt out, who's going to step in or who can step in to actually take that position and like walk this, further, whether this person can come back in or this person is just not going to show up anymore. Like we have to make sure that, we're building capacity within the movement. So everybody understands what's going on, one, but two, like everybody's able to articulate it in a way where it convinces other folks in the community to get involved as well. And I think that leads to, one, it leads to better work within the community. Things aren't siloed. Everybody's on a string, so to speak. And you're just working together in just a cohesive way where it's just like, you know how things are, or you have a lot of hope for how things are going to turn out. Because again, if you just go about it where you just And again, this is the other experience. If you just go about it in a way where it's like, hey, we got to get this done by what is it now, July? We have to get this done by September. Um, one that I think that's going to cause burnout in itself because you're creating, anxiety and just stress. And then again, like, you're creating urgency that might not need to be there. And unfortunately, a lot of times, and I've experienced this enough to talk about it. Organizations, we create these timelines that don't need to exist. And we're roping people into a movement, or not even to a movement, into a campaign that, you know, once they're done, the sad thing is like they just become, two sentences in a grant, So it's like, I hope most of us aren't thinking that way, but at the same time, like I've seen it happen enough to know that it's an issue within organizations. So
Yeah, Daniel, I want to jump off of what you were saying too about the aspect of timeline and urgency, because um, I think one of the things I've learned over the years is uh, one of the ways that we can try to fight against that is to, a lot of it is learned by doing, but discerning when something is urgent or when something is an emergency. Um, because there can be instances, for instance, where the town sends out a message to folks in the neighborhood about a specific development coming or about something that's going to happen, and people are immediately like, okay, we got to act, we got to go. It's happened, and usually when municipalities are sending something out, they're sending it with very little information, and also it's like happening tomorrow. So you're like, so people are just like, oh, we got to act, we got to get together. And there's like this frenzy. And it's been helpful to like discern in those processes where it's like, okay, well, actually, like, where is this thing in the process? And what is the action that actually makes sense? Is it really just actually like we just need to call this person and that, or call like that council member that we have a connection with, or call somebody on the staff, or write something in really quickly? And actually, it's like, oh no, this is actually not this far in the process where a decision is going to be made. And because I think for us, it's figuring out like, okay, well, when is an actual decision that has effects and impacts on the community going to be made? And we realized that in some aspects of we need to respond to that, because we can't respond to everything, because if we responded to everything, we would fully burn ourselves out. But then we've also realized that there are some times, and we've had lessons learned where it's like, oh, actually, we really needed to show up strong to that meeting because this decision was made, and now this development is in this part of the process, or this ordinance or this policy is in this part of the process, that it's going to be hard to walk that back. Um, and so I think that's the kind of like dance that we're constantly doing, because we know that like we as a community and as an organization, if we show up 100% to everything, not everything needs that, and we will burn ourselves out. Um, I think also one of the things that we've also thought about and what we've done in terms of like the two things in terms of how do we prevent burnout is we take an abundance approach method to like our organizing, and really think about like, okay, what's the abundance that exists in the community that we have? And so for instance, it's like, okay, instead of, for instance, us as staff trying to organize and get every person on our own to show up, we know that this person knows everybody on their block. So if we give this person who's a block captain this information, they're going to disseminate to everybody on their block, and they will be more likely to get somebody to show up to something, to an action, or to a meeting, or to move something forward, than if all of us try to knock on every single door as staff members. If we know the church is our local connection, and there's 5 historically Black churches just within this area, let's get it so they do the church announcements, because they do the church announcements every Sunday. Let's get this in the church announcements so it's there. Where are the spaces where people gather? How do we get this to the barbershop? So we always are thinking about how do we spread, as organizing, how do we spread the message, or what needs to get, or the information, or the action, or whatever it is, um, out in a way to where we're just like kind of lighting the flame, and we're lighting the flame to start things moving in the neighborhood that already has also a history of organizing. Like, people know what to do. People know how to pick up the phone and call people. People are used to speaking up. People are used to being in the streets. People are used to speaking to people in power. So we strategically think about here are our captains who we can get that out to, who we know will get it out to those people so that we don't burn ourselves out. And also, it's also way more effective because we're just, again, tapping into the community fabrics that already exist. And that way, it's also more efficient and we try, and also it prevents burnout of staff and volunteers and people who are involved as well. And I think the last thing I'll say when I thought about this question really quickly is that one of the discernment pieces is also just recognizing when we have to stop and we have we serve a community that is aging and so people are passing away and so a lesson I've learned is that like there actually are times when what calls for it where we just need to pause, where we just need to mourn, where we just need to be in community and grieve and show up with a plate of food. And that's actually also part of the work. We don't pushing and pushing to try to move something forward might not actually be what that moment calls for.
Thanks so much, George. I know you got something. We got 3 minutes. I'll let you go ahead and, and jump in there, Daniel, and then we'll transition
No,
to the.
thank you so much. I saw we're moving on to the Q&A, but I wanted to say this. And George, you touched on it, but one of the scary things about doing this work is, and I'm glad you just brought up what you just ended on. The scary thing, and it's interchangeable in burnout, but it's other words, desensitized. It's very easy just to become numb to the work. And I know burnout is just more like, hey, like the way I see burnout is more like, hey, I still care, but I'm just so tired. I don't know what to do anymore, and it's stressing me out, outside of the job. But being desensitized is the more scary part, where it's just like, hey, people are showing up, they need you, and you're doing everything, but you're not feeling any of it. I've seen this on multiple occasions, and George, what you just brought up is super important. Just having the ability or just knowing when you need to stop and just say like, hey, let's celebrate something before, we forget how to, is super important. So thank you for bringing that up.
So thanks, y'all. Real quick, could each of you maybe name three characteristics you would say there are, like, what are three characteristics of good organizing? And if you got like one example of where you're seeing that.
Oh, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I missed it again. My fault.
I said, could you maybe name just a couple of characteristics that you would say make organizing good organizing, and maybe just one example of a group that you would say is doing really good organizing besides your own.
Uh, sure, sure. Yeah, I think consistency. The consistency, I think, is the biggest thing. Just making sure that you're consistent and you're not reaching out when you need something to community members. You're reaching out because, hey, like you actually care about what's going on in your community. I had, again, going back to Ms. Brazil, if I missed a phone call on a weekly basis, she let me know about it. You know what I mean? I think that's the other thing. So consistency, I think, plays a role in accountability too. So I think and then the third one I would say is trust. And I think, consistency leads to that accountability, and accountability, knowing the community knowing they can keep you accountable, creates that trust. And I think trust is what, moves the work forward and its best case. Um, and I'll say that as far as movements go, I mean, there's so many out there that are doing such great work. But I have to be biased and I have to say like this, like there is a local movement within the city of Newark, and it's Homes for All Newark, which is, again, it's those folks that they just consistently they just built a base. They have one thing that they really, which is housing justice. But they've learned over the years how to articulate housing, how it relates to environmental justice, how environmental justice and housing relates to racial equity, how that relates to language justice, everything else. It's one of those movements where I'm very glad I can say like, hey, if there's anyone we can reach out to help a particular matter, or folks that we know that are willing to work on things within the city of Newark, those are folks that we can reach out to. That's good to know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think my three were trust, because like nothing works without trust. Like we can't work without trust. If people don't trust you, if people don't know you. And I think the second one, or what's connected to that, is relationships, like real and authentic relationships. Because if people feel like, if people know that you are in real relationship with them, then they will hold you accountable, or they'll call you out, or they'll say, no, you're moving in this direction. You need to come back this way. That's not what we were trying to do. And do it in love in all the different ways. And I think that's how it's real, with those trust and relationships. And then I'd say creativity, like create thinking, what are the different ways and the creative ways that we can not only like dream for the future that we want to see, and put those visions into place and then figure out how we get to those, but also like what are the different ways that we can like communicate what we need to communicate. Um, and I think that's so key and so fantastic. I would say a movement. I thought about one, but then one just came to mind right now. Another one came to mind. Is the Orange County Property Tax Justice Coalition. And this is a coalition of about maybe 15 or so, um, historically black and mostly historically black, but also like diverse neighborhoods across Orange County who are fighting back against the inequitable property valuations that are taking place in Orange County, North Carolina. And it's a full coalition effort. There's no website or like home base. It's just people coming together from all these different neighborhoods. You have all these different experiences, but are also all focused in on making sure that like our neighborhoods don't get displaced. And just the multi-pronged strategy of it that is happening, of folks like doing direct action work. So the folks who like do organizing work or part of the group can organize and get 100 people to show up at the county, for a speak in, or to like talk to the county commissioners and folks. People are writing to the news organizations to get communications out there, creating different like communications and videos around inequitable property taxes and how that's working, creating letters. There's just multi-pronged nature of what the organization, the coalition is doing, because of bringing in all these different folks who have these different skills, but then organizing in a way that it's also one cohesive message, or it's one cohesive and one very clear work of y'all got to figure out how you change these, change how you evaluate properties, because it's not working and you keep doing it, and we have to change it. And we need to, on a systems level, like on a county level, change how things are done. But also, we're going to make sure that we have the resources to directly mitigate the problem in the immediate moment.
Um, Thank y'all so much. Thank you for your insights and your stories and sharing about your work. I hope folks have found this helpful. I'm going to pass it back over to Seth that we could jump into our Q&A with the room.
Yeah, we're going to keep the conversation going. This has been tremendous. But at this time, anyone in the audience is welcome to lean in with a question that you have. We encourage folks to use the raised hand feature if you're able, just so that we can not have us all talking over each other, sit in painful, awkward silences. But whatever works for you is good. So does anyone have a question for George and Daniel that's coming to mind?
I don't know if I have a question per se, but I guess a reaction. I love the just how you guys streamline the difference between, service, activism, organizing, and being someone who was trained under what they call it, forget the name. Like, I'm sorry, yeah, my brain is fried. Um, Trained as an organizer from what's his name? Alinsky, is it Alinsky? Like Saul Alinsky, and going through that type of training, right? And working for a predominantly white, organizing, working under predominantly white organizers. Um, it was like we had to be exclusively organizers, like, no, organizer, we're not, you don't work, we're not activists, we're not there. And I know there's a separate thing, but it's an ecosystem. You can't say you organize in a community and you don't include the activists, you don't include the media. Like, they're all a part of the community. And so I love that how y'all separated that, but also gave examples of how the parts work together, because we often don't see that. And I think that's very important. And as a person that sits at the intersection of organizing and media, and strategy, like, I also get pushed back on being a journalist and how, media is not supposed to work organizing. But I disagree, especially for our communities. Like, we have to be resilient. We have to use all of our, tools to really, make sure we push for liberation for our communities and for our people and what they need. And so I just really, this conversation was just really validating and a good refresher on what the lane is. I feel like I can comfortably say in every space I'm in, I'm an organizer. Like, I wear all these other hats, but organizer is the foundation, right? And I feel like it's something that it's a skill set that everybody should learn, especially if you're trying to be a civic leader. So thanks for this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just want to follow up on that real quick. And Asia, you brought something up that I think it's really cool to know is like whether you're doing direct services or you're an advocate, I think you can lump yourself into the organizer title. And I think one of the important things to do when we do lump ourselves into organizing is just how intentional we want to be with the role we want to play. It's similar to like when we are organizing in general, we want to know what everyone's strength is. And again, Seth brought it up in the beginning of the conversation. As organizers, we might fall ass backwards, excuse my language, ass backwards into direct services, but at the same time, if we're comfortable with that, why not use that as a tool to bring people into community work? So again, just emphasizing intentionality behind the work is key.
Really love that. And I would say this reminds me a little bit of our housing justice webinar as well. This was a long-term tension within KC Tenants, who's had some tremendous successes doing housing justice work in Kansas City. Between folks, a lot of the organizing work grew out of an emergency housing hotline. And folks were really grappling within the coalition of like, well, this isn't the systems change work. This isn't the long-term organizing. And other people saying, this is driving people into our coalition, and this is what people need today. So I think that is like a very healthy thing to keep an eye on of like, when we try to draw those bright lines around whether direct service is appropriate, who's providing the direct service and who's benefiting from it. And so when we say we're putting direct service down, what are we really saying about who belongs in our coalition and has the resources to be able to lean into this work? And who are we protecting by not doing that work? Vanessa, I think your hand was up first, so I'm going to invite you to
Great, thank you. So thank you everybody for your time and the insightful conversation. I have the privilege of being Alinsky trained and Midwest Academy trained, which that's an interesting story, right? But now what I've found in the later part of my career, I end up being in more administrative roles. And I still bring those organizing skills to the leadership teams that I'm in. I do almost every new job I get, I do a one-on-one with everybody, start building that relationship, building that trust. I am curious to hear y'all's perspectives. I'm currently have just started working in the small business and entrepreneur ecosystem. And what we're really doing is we're providing services to people who want to start a small business, right? Or who have already started a small business and need some guidance and support. And I'm curious as to y'all's experience or thoughts on what organizing in that space might look like. Because in this case, I am in more of the direct service role, but I'm also a director of the program. So I'm also in a relationship building role throughout the region. And that's actually obviously my favorite part of organizing, right? Is those relationships and how rich and how long lasting they can be. but I'm just curious to know if you all have any experience, or folks who have experience in specifically like the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And I know that sometimes small businesses can be a part of the organizing work, right? Especially if you're doing in a physical community, you want to bring folks on board. I think my experience thus far, though, is a lot of this small business is very individualistic. Okay, I'm going to let that be my statements and questions. The end.
Um, I'll jump in. I just want to, so Vanessa, like fully like understand your experience, and actually thank you for saying that, because I had no plan on being an executive director. That was not in the cards. And one of the things that I've been taking into this and learning through the years in this very like executive leadership, but also administrative role, which can get very bogged down in the administration and like running the business, which is a whole thing we could probably have a whole other conversation on the balance of like doing the work but running the business so that the work can happen, so that the business can, all of that. But I would say that like that relationship building is like so key to being in more of the administrative roles, but also even the like crafting of like the job charge for the folks, and being like, okay, well, like I think about it as like choreography, because I'm also a dancer and a choreographer and a movement maker. And so, a job is like how basically it's a role, but it's a role that fits into a larger like dance of how we as an organization are moving our mission forward. And so like I think from the organizing perspective, having that hindsight to be like, okay, well, where do you as this person, based on the skills, experience, connections, values that you have, even areas to grow, how do we create a situation where you're able to like thrive but also like move something forward in this larger puzzle? And I feel like we're, as organizers, we were able to like maybe zoom out and be able to see more of like how all the things are working together and how all the things are moving together, even if it's from an internal organizational perspective or internal management or administrative perspective. So I just appreciate you bringing that up, because I'm like, yes, challenge, but also I feel like um, we're very we have a skill set, or we have an affinity to be able to do that really well. Um, Around the small businesses, yeah, that's something we have not really done much on. So maybe Daniel, you can speak more to it, because I don't have that much experience. We try to
Yeah.
engage with our small like businesses as much as possible, but I haven't had that much experience of like how to really as an organizer, or plant them into this work, or support them in that type of way.
Yeah. So we're both. I mean, in my administrative roles, like I said before, I've been a managing director. Right now, I'm in an administrative role. And sorry if Hallie Abdul, if you're on here right now, or if you see this in the future, I hate the administrative role. I'm not built for it. So I try to plug organizing into anything I can, and the more radical, the better. But I will say this, as far as entrepreneurial and small business stuff. Yes, we've done work around that before, but it's more. Um, it's been more involved with like you can't beat them, join them. So like development in our area, we noticed that commercial space isn't being rented because the cost per square footage is very high. So we have a lot of vacancy on commercial ground commercial space. Uh, so we've spoken to, or have worked with developers in the past, via the city, to work with developers, say like, hey, can you open up these spaces for small businesses, whether it be like small scale like pop-ups, or like working out like long-term leases where they're affordable, which is something I haven't seen happen. But it turned into more conversation about creating rent control for commercial spaces for small businesses. But as far as like entrepreneurs and like those really small kind of just like startups, businesses, we've worked with those folks as well. And it's more, and I hear you on that. I think that's what you're saying. It can be self-servicing, self-service. They are working within capitalism. So like, we want to make sure that they're not taxing the community that they're actually, living in, or experience on a day-to-day basis. So we want to make sure that there's a little bit of justice, or actually there's a lot of justice involved with that too. So those are hard conversations to have sometimes, especially when folks are kind of just moving towards like, hey, I want to make money. versus like, let's do something in an equitable way where like these small businesses are actually like helping the community rather than taking from them. Because, some of our corner stores and our bodegas, whatever you call them in your community, those are places where like, those are small businesses that we want to work with, but we do see like there are also places that exploit our communities in the worst ways, so it's a hard thing to juggle and balance. But yeah, working with them, I think it's more along the lines of having that organizer spirit and saying like, hey, how can we make this equitable, and how can everyone that's involved with this process see how like there's a balance to it, I guess. And I hope that answers your question. But that's been my experience with it.
Thank you,
We're
guys.
we're getting close to time, so we're gonna start lightning round and stuff to the degree we can. There's some very big meaty questions in the chat, and we're gonna try to get to those. We will grab the chat transcript and we'll try to get some answers out to folks too. In follow-up, we'll also be providing the recording in the deck. But did want to give Asia an opportunity to jump on if you want, and then I'm gonna hop in with some lightning round chat questions.
Oh yes, my question was, I know I was trained, that to not be issue based, right? Like organizers, you don't come in with the issue, but often, I mean, we build campaigns. So like, what's your thoughts around balancing, you know, we lead having an issue based campaign, but also allowing the organizer to reveal what that issue may be, and also how we communicate that.
Yeah. I'll start with again. This is something I'll live and die by. I always feel like it's best to have the community bring the issue to us to make sure we could work on that campaign. But again, like even being from the community and I have a privilege that comes with that, right? Like I have access to things that folks in the community don't have. So I could easily say like, hey, this is wrong with the community. But again, it goes back to what I was saying. Like I might be creating urgency that the community is not necessarily ready for. So I think when a community member comes to us or comes to me and says like, hey, this is something that I'm dealing with. Can you point me towards how I can get resources to help this campaign, or can you help me with this campaign? I feel way more comfortable with that because I feel like, that's, whether I'm in my organizing role or my role at the Legal Design Lab, I think like that's more comfortable because I feel like I'm playing the role as a helper rather than like somebody that's like saying like dragging people along to say like you need to work on this because we feel like it's the fit thing to do.
Yeah, I'll say for me, like my all of my organizing experience is in Northside. So that's where it's always been the approach of like community first. So, what the community wants to do, I'm here as an organizer, facilitator, collaborator to initiate that and make that happen. I will say I think one of the things I've learned though as well is like from being here for 12 years and forming relationships is also then how because of those relationships when is it more possible for me to like put more of myself into there and because people trust me and to be like instead of just be solely like okay we're moving like a neutral party just to be like well actually because I've been here for a little bit I don't think we should do that and here's why and then people can I'm not dictating this is what we're going to do, but I can actually be in a dialogue to be like, here's my thoughts. And people are like, well, I know you and I hate that thought. And here's why. And then we have a dialogue to get to somewhere. So I feel like those relationships that have to be built over time also allow you as an organizer to like do maybe more risky things and put yourself out there and be like, I actually have thoughts and here are my thoughts. But that takes a little bit of time.
What advice would you give for someone who's emerging as an organizer? Like, what's a first step that you would recommend taking?
Ooh, expect the unexpected. Like um, again, I came into this work thinking that I was gonna be working on placemaking initiatives and like creating large scale public art. Even though like I was able to do that, the very first thing I worked on was a housing campaign that I had no idea was actually part of the work that I would be doing in the long term. So I would say that expect the unexpected. Have a willingness to learn. I think especially if if you're going into more movement or like base building stuff and trying to build movements rather than urgency or issue based stuff, I would say, read. If you're working towards policy, research that policy as much as possible. Learn your local ordinances, from everything from housing to environment to anything under the sun. Learn ordinances, just so you'll be able to articulate things to folks when they come to you. Um, but overall, I think coming to this work knowing that it's not a skill that you're ever going to perfect. It's more of a learning process over the years that you definitely want to build rather than get to a point where you're saying like, all right, I learned enough. Because it's community organizing. Our communities evolve, but at the same time, like we have to be able to adjust to the community evolving as well. So.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, like, really get to know the players. Like, who are the players within your community who make a difference, or who people listen to and why, and get an understanding of that. And then also, who are the players in terms of like where the spaces or the geography you're working in? Who are the ones who pull the levers? Who are the ones who stop things? Who are the ones that block things? Like, really getting a sense of like who the players are on what partners that you need to have and why is really critical. And then I would say also like the value. It's almost like readjust maybe your approach to time. And when I'm saying that is that, like, 1 hour, 2 hour conversation with one person where then you're building a like really deep relationship can be more effective and productive than if you like maybe got 100 flyers out there. Or if you did, like, the quantity sometimes doesn't always match up, but so be open for like, oh wait, this is like a relationship that I'm building. Like, let me root myself in this relationship, in these relationships, because this can actually be how we move things forward and how you're more successful as an organizer.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. This super great you brought that up, and I heard this in another third space conversation too, and somebody said it, and it's been said in organizing before, but like plan for 100 people, but hope one person shows up. I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you to everyone for their thoughtful questions as well. I promise you we will try to get some answer back to you if we did not get to your question. But really appreciate the time that everyone took. The People's Practice is really committed to continuing this conversation. As Dominique mentioned, there's links to our prior webinars and other resources. And we would just encourage folks to think about, in the name of organizing, like, what's one thing that you can do coming out of this meeting to strengthen your own organizing practice, to connect to the people in this room or to the people in your community. And hopefully just take that intention with you as you follow up the day. And then remember to check back with the People's Practice website and the People's Practice staff to continue to engage in this national work. We're making a difference in a very tough environment, but I think we are getting it done. So much appreciation to both of our panelists and to everyone who came, and especially to the People's Practice for keeping this work going. That is a wrap, folks. I'm going to give you a minute if you need to grab anything or say goodbye.